In interviewing Aaron's father, Jan Milburn, and interviewing his whole family, their stories were so great that, different than all my other books, I wasn't going to write about them and it's my voice that tells them. I have them tell their own story. Jan tells me that he got lost in a snowstorm in the mountains of Santa Cruz, California, and he was 10 years old, and he was crying and desperate, and he couldn't find the dirt road to go up to find his home and his estate up in the mountains. And then he looks to the right, he feels that, and there was a mountain lion, a huge mountain lion. But he said instead of being terrified, he looked at the mountain lion's eyes, and they looked soft and kind. And he breathed deeply, and the mountain lion walked off through the giant redwoods, and he followed it. And what happened? It led him home to his door. And he found his totem, his Indian totem, his guide at that age. And that's what transformed him into becoming an indigenous human being. Jan explained to me that his father had died and left him a big policy in the Midwest for his death. So his mother moved out with the family to Santa Cruz, and they bought a big estate in the mountains with a great big house. And his brother, a brilliant engineer, was working at IBM. And they were just so full of themselves. And he felt so unloved. And because he wanted to stay in the woods, he wanted to sing in the choir at church. And they thought he was a sissy. And his mother, if he wasn't ready at school, she'd just drive home and leave him. So he had to walk 5 miles up the hills to his home. And what happened? He found the Mexican workers walking in from the fields, and they're laughing and walking up the same distance. And he joined them, and he found laughter among these real poor guys. And then they would run and have little races with him, a little sprints. So he started sprinting with them, and they'd camp out in their shacks made out of cardboard, and he would hang out with them, and he became attracted to these Mexican Indians that knew how to laugh with carcajadas and enjoy life. And his family had so much of everything, didn't do that. Look, you need to understand that I really didn't want to do this book. I have a cast here. I've been writing for 60 years, longhand. My hand hurts so much at night that sometimes I can't sleep, and I take pain pills and they don't help, and I have to put it on ice, like a baseball pitcher or something. And yet, the more I interviewed Jan Milburn and the people around him, I discovered a wealth of information. This is a white guy, a Brad Pitt, a Forrest Gump, that becomes indigenous starting at 10 years old when he followed that mountain lion home. And then he becomes friends with those workers coming up the hill. And their laughter, their carcajadas. This shows us, like in the movie, the closest movie to it is Dances with Wolves. But what happens is Dances with Wolves, after we get to know these wonderful people and all that, they lose. And the establishment comes in and wipes them out, and they have to run and hide. Here the difference is this man finds the indigenous world and a world of miracles. He mixes Christianity with indigenous spirituality, and miracles happen, and they're true. This book will inspire you that all of us, all over the world, even with modern times, can turn around and heal our planet and heal ourselves. The future is wonderful. That's what this book showed me and shows us. This book is full of real people, and they tell their own stories. For instance, Mireya, the Indian girl from Creel, the Copper Canyon, she says, I was in love with him before I ever met him. He was handsome, they said. He was noble, he said. And I was taught that a man will give his life willingly for his family, that a man is willing to fight for his family and his loved ones. And this man, Jan, did that. So what happens the first day I saw him? I saw that these other women were attracted to him because he's so handsome, and they were showing off their bodies and their big boobs and everything. So what did I do? I knew I didn't have a chance. I was just a skinny Indian girl of 15 years old. So I ran up and leaped on him and put my legs around him and squeezed him in and grabbed his face and started kissing him and kissing him. And he was shocked and everybody else was shocked. But I had marked my territory. Just like a young doe finds the path of the buck she wants to mount her, and she urinates there. I know the ways of the world. I was raised in the wild, and I was wildly in love with him. Jan had to keep going those 5 miles up the hill from his school to their estate. And he started running up there with the Mexican guys, and some of them were sprinters, so he'd sprint with them. And he's just a kid, and he's sprinting with them and sprinting with them. And he grows and he grows and he grows taller than his brother that's the big engineer and all that. And then what happens? He goes to track meets, and he wipes out everybody. He becomes one of the fastest 220 runners in all the Bay Area. And it's because of his friendship with these Mexican guys that are so poor. And then he gets a motorcycle. He gets his a motorcycle, and he's gotten his minister's license from Harvard, which he did by mail. And he became at 17 a minister. And what does he do? He buys a motorcycle, and he's riding with a motorcycle with a big Mexican hat and a poncho. And he becomes famous. He sets up a halfway house, a safe house for drug addicts down by Monterey. Then he sets up another one in San Francisco, and he goes from one place to the other many times a night, and he gets famous. Joan Baez comes to sing there. Other people come by, and then he meets a tall, skinny guy, and who is it? It's Clint Eastwood, just like Forrest Gump taught Elvis Presley how to dance. Clint Eastwood fell in love with this man and wanted to know all about his life and why he did what he did. And he was afraid of going to do the spaghetti westerns, but with Jan's endorsement, he went, and he started dressing just like Jan. This man invented the spaghetti westerns, just like Forrest Gump invented Elvis Presley. And all this time, as he's riding a motorcycle, and he looks like a muscular Brad Pitt, a young muscular Brad Pitt, the girls are trying to take him to bed and de-virgin him. But he says no, that he's saving himself for marriage. And they love him for it. And he plays the guitar and sings because he was part of the choir at church starting at 10 years old. And finally, when he looks like he's going to have a nervous breakdown from working so hard, and then in the summer times going up into Montana and jumping out in a parachutes to put out fires so he can make enough money to run his halfway houses, safe houses. He starts having nervous breakdowns, just burning himself to, so they tell him he's got to go to Mexico and take a rest. And what happens? He goes thinking he's been a failure. 200-300 kids show up at the airport to see him off, and they say, "You're our hero. You walk your talk. You are wonderful." Yes, that's our Forrest Gump. And then, when he gets to Mexico, they ask him if he can speak Spanish. He says, "Oh yeah, I know quite a few words. I know buenos dias, good morning, and then I know other words." And then he said, "Oh, and I know thank you." And he uses a swear word. He says, "Chinga tu madre." And they say, "What is that?" And he says, "Well, that's thank you very much." And they say, "No, no, no, that's a swear word." And he says, "Well, that's what they taught me. I wonder what else they taught me that I didn't know what it meant." He's as innocent as Forrest Gump. And what does he do in Mexico? He starts a radio program. They love him singing with his broken Spanish. And he becomes so successful that he opens up 65 safe houses. And the governor's wife wants to meet him. The governor's mother becomes his ally. And then the minister's daughter is madly in love with him. And he gets married. And life goes on from one thing to another. And what happens? The drug lords decide to kill him. The movie, the way I see it to begin, starts just like in Dances with Wolves. It shows him with all these legs being cut off and all this, and he puts on his boot and he does a miraculous thing. What happened to Jan? He came here to stay with me so I could interview him some more, and his back was hurting so much and everything was hurting, so I took him to my sister, who's a curandera, healer, and she's got a house full of gardens and everything. And a woman was coming out with a wheelchair, and she was no longer in it. And the woman was saying, "You mean I don't have to use my wheelchair anymore?" And my sister says, "It's up to you. Do you think you need it?" "Well, no, I can walk. But the doctor said I needed another operation." I said, "Listen to your own body. 90% of all healing happens within us in relationship to our body and God." So she said, "Well, then I don't even need this wheelchair." And she walks off. And then Jan goes in and she sits him down lays him down on a table, and she goes like this over his body. And she said, "I'm feeling your energy to see where to start. You don't have to tell me where the problem is. My guides will guide me to it." And she starts going like this, and suddenly she goes, "Ah!" And she screams and leaps back. And he says, "What is it?" She said, "In all my years of healing, I've never had an experience. You should be dead. According to this, all your bones have been broken and beaten, and your legs and your arms. Did a car run over you and what?" And she said, "Not only did it run over me, it backed up over me. After I set all those safe houses in Mexico, they tried to kill me 3 times. But the ropes came off when they tried to drag me through the streets. And all these miracles happened. And that's when they took me up into the mountains to hide." And she said, "And that's when you got 2 million acres of indigenous land returned to the Indians?" She said, "Yes. Miracles have been following me all my life." And my sister said, "It's a blessing that you came to me, and I'll help you." And up there in Creole, driving up there, it was a priest that took him to hide him up there. The conversation that priest and him have about reality and miracles is breathtaking. I just reread it. It takes us, civilized people, with 5 senses into the world of 13 senses, into the world of miracles, into the thing that Walt Emerson said about what lies before you and behind you are small matters compared to what lies within you. And when you bring what's within you out into the world, miracles happen. This book gives us the tools with which to become miracle makers. And that's what we need to become to help heal our Mother Earth. This book brings together all of my writing, and I wasn't going to do it. I thought I was done. And then this book, well, my arm swelled up and I couldn't stop shaking, but I couldn't stop writing. This is a magical book for all of us.